Thank you for joining us. This is Art in the Digital World. I'm your host, Brandon Towne, and this is our second show with our guest, teacher and artist, Brian Sinclair. Thank you for joining us.
No problem.
Again.
Glad to be here again.
We had a really great show last time. We talked about mostly about Painter for some of the one of the programs that the students use at MJC. But I wanted to ask you about, you told us a little bit about you starting to teach. How did you get into teaching? Like, what really? Tell me a little bit of the story of why you went into teaching. How did you get into it?
That's actually a pretty good story. I actually went to MJC myself, and I have an identical twin brother who's a fabulous artist, and we had this whole identity crisis thing going on, and I just chose not to go into art because I wanted to do something different. And as a matter of fact, I tried out the Division of Forestry, which is now the Department of Forestry, here in San Andreas, just up the street, and that didn't work out real well, and I tried a bunch of other things, and after denying my artistic, tendencies, I ended up taking some art classes at Modesto Junior College, and ended up taking a class with a gentleman by the name of Terry Hartman, who just retired last semester, by the way, and actually will still be teaching for us. And after taking a few classes, he just looked at me and said, "You need to teach." And I said, "No, I'm not going to teach." And he goes, "Yeah, you need to teach." So I said, "No, I'm not going to." He goes, "But you can make a living with art." And he convinced me that I actually could, that I didn't need to, do something different than my brother did, and convinced me and my brother as well to go down to Art Center College of Design in Pasadena. Graduated there, went into marketing after that for dental and medical field, because honestly, I didn't want to live in LA, and that was a way of making a living. That's how I got into the digital realm. That was in Washington. Moved back down here to take care of my parents who were getting older, and Terry was still teaching at MJC, and he goes, "Come over and apply." I go, "No, I really don't want to." He goes, yeah, you need to teach." And I said, "No, I'm not going to teach." And finally, I went over and taught one class, and just clicked. I should have listened to him from the beginning, and the rest is history. I just love it. The students are fabulous. It couldn't be more fun, and hopefully I'm doing a good job teaching too. I think I am, but that's the story.
So, as best as you could answer this, what do you like about teaching? What is it that you enjoy about it?
I'm tempted to tell you what my wife would tell you, and that is that he gets to stand up in front of the class and with a captive audience and talk a lot. Because you can probably tell I actually don't hesitate talking. I'm actually very comfortable in front of a crowd. But the thing is that I am just really passionate about my art, and I believe very strongly that anybody can do it. It's a skill that some people do have an affinity for, and there are natural artists out there. But we're all artists at heart in some way. There's a lot of artistic things. I mean, accountants hopefully aren't terribly artistic because it might be illegal, but they can get that way. Everything can be creative. But to put it, bluntly, I think everyone can draw, everyone can paint, and I love showing people that they can. So,
on the other side, is there anything that you're not a big fan of with teaching? What is it maybe that you don't like about teaching?
I think that you probably know the answer to that one, although my other degree is business, so the whole administrative side is pretty fascinating, teaching too. But that's probably the biggest negative with teaching, is having to grade. So I don't know. Grading really isn't the biggest issue. It's really that it takes a lot of administrative work on the part of teachers on all levels to do that. And but that's part of the game. That's what we all have to do. So
now, does MJC offer? Is it just a certificate or associates, or do they do bachilors too, or what do they offer?
Community colleges in California do not offer bachelor's degrees.
Right.
It's very interesting. We have an interim president who I was listening to talk today. He's from Florida, and Florida actually they do. So different states, community colleges do offer bachelor's degrees. They're trying to merge their university system with their community college systems, and they actually have done that. But I think that's probably not the best idea. Now, we offer associate degrees, both Associate of Science and AAs, and then various programs also offer certificates. We offer an AS, Associate of Science, and a certificate in computer graphics at MJC.
And a lot of the students take that and they go to a bigger school for their bachelor's, or?
If they listen to me. Yeah, you can go out and get a job in computer graphics, and as I mentioned on the last show, that's a general term. It's a broad field. There's a lot of stuff you can do, and so that's kind of a meaningless term when it comes to getting a job. You need to be more specific. I teach the portfolio classes there, and while those classes are designed to help a student develop a portfolio, a show place for their skills and their talents, it's also a class that we use to do a little bit of career counseling. My goal for that class is to make sure that those students, when they walk out the door at MJC, know where they're going and have the tools to be able to do that. And that means investigating what the job market is and trying to figure out where their end goal is or what their end goal is, and make sure that they have a clear idea of where their skill gaps are, which is a big issue at most community colleges because it's technically a 2-year program. That's not enough time to really give them tons of skills. So I always recommend that they go on and get more education if they have talent. If they don't want to do that, then we try and steer them towards jobs that take less skill and maybe are a little more specific. So.
Now, I went to school for video production, and it wasn't about portfolio, it was a demo reel.
Right.
So maybe
we do demo reels as well. Yeah.
So maybe tell us a little bit about, like, what is a portfolio? What we know you need it, and it helps for getting a job and it shows your work, but what is it? I mean, it's a book, right? It's like a binder. Or it depends on what I guess
it's whatever you want it to be.
Okay.
No, when I took over the class, what the portfolio was is a black case with a handle. Now, you have to understand that we teach, the portfolio class covers fine arts too. So I teach portfolio to fine art students and computer graphics students. It's a cross-referenced class. And so that complicates things a little bit. But even for fine arts students, when you have large pieces, pretty much everybody is going digital. So while there was a requirement for any particular part of our industry, I think we talked about entertainment industry is really the big one, but the other big requirement for portfolios is entrance into other colleges. A lot of the colleges don't require entrance portfolio any longer. The good ones still do. So the requirements, the specific physical requirements for a portfolio are kind of out the window now, which opens up the possibilities for creativity really, really a lot. So what we do is generally provide a digital portfolio, and they can do whatever they want. If they have some ideas, it can be a demo reel, it can be a video, it can be a PDF, it can be a website. Any of those things are acceptable as long as it creates a venue that will present their work in its best light. And the other thing, strangely enough, is a hard copy, but typically we'll do small hard copies because just as a sketchbook and drawing is more immediate and more connected with your psyche than a computer is, and I think always will be, it's the same thing with a piece of hard copy laying on a table. That's really more immediate than turning a computer on or going on a web page. And it's way faster. So most of the students opt for doing both a hard copy portfolio and a digital portfolio. That's something that I have them sign a contract up front. We figure out what they're going to be graded on. So it can be anything. For our class, it can be anything. And I think that's appropriate. But most do a small hard copy with some high quality output, maybe even bound a little bit. They do some creative things with that. And then some form of digital, which we work together to decide what that's going to be. So.
Do you think that there are more companies out there hiring people just based off of a digital submission or a digital application?
Well, there's always, that.
Before the interview.
I think that there are things that can get in the way of having your artwork be accessible in a portfolio. A bad portfolio is worse than no portfolio a lot of times. So yeah, I think a portfolio can be very, very important in that regard. And I don't say this to students really often. But the whole notion of talent shines through. It doesn't really matter. If you got the talent there, they're going to see it one way or the other, really. And I wouldn't say that to students because I want them to have a really nice portfolio. And why give yourself, any negatives, any strikes against you when you can, present it nicely as well. But so portfolio will help you move that direction. Obviously, that's why we're doing that. Now, the key part is that, and this is a little devious, I think, but you're looking at someone that can make bad art look really, really good with a good portfolio. And that's the whole thing here. Eventually they're going to find out if that particular artist is talented or not. But the whole goal is getting an interview, because the interview is all about finding out if it's a good fit. And if you can't get through the door, they're never going to find that out.
Now, one of the big things right now that we have is the economy. People talk a lot about the economy. And a lot of the schools. Do you think that the degrees that people are getting, even associates, are as important as maybe they used to be? Do you think that it is important for people to go to school and learn this stuff? Or, do you think it might be better to take other kinds of routes to try and get into the digital, as far as the graphic artist or the all-encompassing graphic artist field goes?
Well, I get asked that question a lot because I have students that are spending a lot of money even at a community college, and they want to know if their money is well spent. And I don't always answer that the same way. It depends on the situation. So yeah, there are times when if I get a really talented student, it just pains me to not have them go on and get more education. But can they make a successful living there? You bet they can. So no, you don't have to have a formal education. I have many friends who never finished their education and are very, very successful. I will tell you that those are the most talented people out there. They're going to rise to the top regardless. It's the people that are in the middle, and that's most of us. I don't know where I stand in that regard, but the fact of the matter is most people aren't outstanding. Most people aren't exceptional, but you can learn to be, and that's where the education comes in, and that's where it actually kind of is important to give yourself all the benefit out there. A degree specifically, no, that's not important at all. It's a stepping stone along the way. A certificate may even be more important than that as far as just someone reading it on a line. Bachelor's degree is very important. So my talented students, I really strongly encourage them to go get more education. And it's not the BA or the BS. It's not the degree. It's the level of richness that it adds to your repertoire, to your training. It really is a big step. And I encourage my students to aim clear to doctoral degrees, and they don't get there, that's fine, but consider it up front, because it's just, for the talented students, you start digging around in there and you really develop who you are as an artist, and you're just going to have a better life with it all, honestly.
So would you say that having a passion or having motivation to just create, because that's who you are, is a lot more important than doing it for a job or doing it for money? Or what's your take on that kind of stuff?
Well, I went to commercial art school, and it was, at the time, I think it was rated by U.S. World News Report as like the #2 art school in the world. It was a really intimidating place to be. And I investigated that whole thing there. And my classmates all thought, I was what they called a wrist. And what that meant is I could do knockoff of anybody. I was very commercial. And they looked down at me because of that, because they all had this whole pretty much, passion and the drive there. And, they were right. They were right. It really wasn't the best approach, I don't think, because I think that passion will take you good places. And that's what I do tell my students. Like, if you don't have a passion for it and you want to succeed in this business, you better get a passion, because it isn't about the money. If you have a passion and you focus on something that you really like to do, you don't want to be stupid about it. You want to go into something that's completely unsaleable, but for the most part, there's nothing that isn't in some place saleable. You might have to move to another city or something, but for the most part, the passion will create success. It will. You can calculate and try to make money, and you can succeed that way, but that's not that much fun. It's not about having fun either, but honestly, passion is what it's about.
Right. I completely agree. Well, that brings up a good point. You kind of touched on it, and that is style, and a unique style, or however you want to put it, maybe.
Yeah.
What's your take on that kind of thing? I'm sure you probably encourage that in your students.
Boy, you know, I had a student come to me one time, and he was probably, I'm guessing 16, very, very young. And I wasn't terribly impressed, although I've learned at MJC, at least at the community colleges, you can't judge anybody. You really need to give, everyone has some value and everyone has something going on there. And this kid was turning in stuff that wasn't getting good grades, but he was doing stuff that was way off the wall. So he wasn't following the directions. But the work was pretty out there, pretty scary. And so he's coming into my office, and I'm going to talk to him and find out that his parents were beating him down. They didn't want him to do art. It's like, and this kid was just, it was just pouring out of his soul. It was just so we had to have the little, have your parents come and talk to me talk. And yes, you can make a living doing art, and look at this stuff that you're doing. And this is, he walked out of there with his, chin held a little higher than than he had. He was almost in tears. There's a lot of angst surrounding the whole notion of whether you can make a living doing art, because when you have a passion for art at that age, it's all over with. He didn't have a choice. He was going to do it one way or the other, and I get a lot of that. I get a lot of very young students that have just been beaten down because the world tells them they can't make a living. And I didn't go to four-year school till I was close to 30 because of that. So I can sympathize, certainly.
And I think it's interesting if you look at art history, and a lot of the artists who were never successful but had such a unique and different style that ended up changing the art world. So.
Well, like I said, you asked about the style, and I sort of got off the subject here. This kid's style was just, I don't know. He would total expressionistic stuff going on here. He had it. It was just all there at 16. Whereas people, a lot of times will take years and years to really refine that style and change over years. So, I don't know. It's the style thing is. Some people, it clicks. Some people, I've always had to work on that. I don't really there's the whole wrist thing again. I can adopt any style I want, and that's kind of not a good thing. Thank God I'm not trying to sell a lot of fine art out there.
I'm sure you have a uniqueness about your art.
I guess it probably isn't valuable to try and speculate on that. Talk to other people about it. They'll give you some opinions. I can't be objective, I don't think.
Well, I want to take a step back about the curriculum. One of the things that I talked about with Susan, the other producer, is about the teachers or the students getting educated in doing traditional art, doing drawings and paintings. But the other one we talked about was history. Mm-hmm. What do you think of the importance of learning art history?
Oh my gosh. Personally, I haven't had a lot of art history. You can't get an art degree without getting a little bit of art history. It's just that, art history, what it does for you is it provides you perspective. So when you see trained artists out there that have their art history behind them, whether it's in architecture or, doesn't matter, any kind of visual art, it provides a reference, and it's everywhere around you. So if you're going into an art realm and you don't understand those references, you're at a total loss. You really are. Not to mention the fact that masters knew what they were doing, which is why they're masters, and it's inspirational, and it gives you a lot of other depth to your work. So is it valuable? It's absolutely valuable, even from a standpoint of popular culture being art history, because a lot of it's not all just ancient art history, it's modern art history as well, because you can go out there and you can throw yourself into the art world, but if you don't understand the references, if you don't understand where it all came from, you're pretty limited. You really are. I had a instructor at Art Center who was a docent. She's Czechoslovakian, and she was a docent at the Louvre, and she studied in China, and she did this Western Eastern art history comparison course. That's the level of stuff, it's like you can find someone that has that background and just talk to them a little bit, much less take a class. Wow. You walk out of there and your art's different. So it really does help a lot. So to answer your question, really important.
And you would say that keeping up with modern contemporary art is also important, especially with your field. In
our field, maybe even more so, because there are more references there. and that's something I have a very hard time with because I'm not a young person, and my passions aren't necessarily where all the cutting edge art is happening. I have to really work at that, and I rely on my students for keeping me trained, which is really kind of nice to have the resource there. So if I see something happening repetitively in a student, I have to stop and say, where's this coming from? Is this referencing something else? And invariably to say, oh yeah, you didn't know this is artists out there. So it's a constant retraining for me as well. I sometimes think to myself, oh gosh, I should have gone into math or something that was more static, and I wouldn't have to retrain myself every 30 freaking seconds. Well, I didn't do it. I mean, that kind of answers that question. Yeah. So, and I actually was into music for a while too, and I wanted to be able to do theory, and I started playing keyboards at the time, and it occurred to me there are instruments out there where you only have to play one note at a time. I also didn't choose one of those. So I don't know, I seem to be able to go the hard route from time to time, and it ends up being a good choice.
So do you think it's important for people to not just learn about the art in, like, if they're a painter, the paintings, but other types of art like film, photography, music, things like that? Do you think that being aware of those kinds of things too is important?
I think it really depends on where you want to go with this. We're talking about educating people to go get a job for the most part. And so we talk about that, and we'll customize a program as much as we can on this level, which isn't much, because if they take our program, they end up with all that anyway. We don't push the sound a whole lot, but we're going there because we just, had some budget cuts, and so a couple of the, our radio and television programs got axed, and so we're going to have to pick up some of this slack as far as sound is concerned. And so we may be pushing that, but we can't hire any. But other than that, we pretty much cover a broad range. And the reason we do that is because, you do need all of that if you're going to go into digital media. And I'm using the term digital media, not computer graphics, because that seems to be a little bit more pervasive now. We may just have to rewrite our curriculum to change it. I don't know. That sounds like a teacher-ish thing to say, doesn't it? It's a broad range of tools is better than a narrow range of tools. More tools is better than fewer. And that's what we try to provide.
Okay.
So.
All right, I got a big one for you.
Oh, a big one.
How important do you think art and creativity is for anybody, not just people who are in the profession, that's their profession, but for the mathematicians or the business people?
Well, that's interesting.
And why?
Because, like I said, I have a business degree also, and when I was getting that degree, it was interesting because they knew that I had an art background, and at some of the big business schools, they were at that point having their graduates, their upper level graduate students take art classes for that very reason. And it just changes your perspective on the world. I taught a basic drawing class once, and at MJC as well, they needed someone to step in, and I'm qualified to do that. And so I went in and taught a basic drawing class, and that class in particular, kind of like the painter class I'm teaching right now, you have students coming in cold, no necessarily art background at all. And to realize that what it is in essence you're trying to do as an instructor there is to change the way people see the world around them. It's a visual literacy thing. Let me put it this way. You're born. If you're a sighted person, if you're not born blind, you open your eyes and immediately start absorbing the world around you. And it's all visual. And it's all shape and color and form. And no one does anything really for the most part to help you develop that. But it's who we are as human beings. We are all visual. And then we get into school and we start learning to be literate with vocabulary and words, with language. And we spend a lot of time on that. But still, unless you take a little art class here or there, you don't have anybody helping you with that. How weird is that? Because we all just process constantly visually. So what we do in our classes is really try and push the whole visual literacy thing. And I don't know, how valuable do you think it is to be able to look at the world around you and analyze your visual world effectively? Because it does make a difference. Why did you wear a black shirt today? Why did you buy a red car? What color are you going to paint your house? Those are all haphazard, intuitive things that we do on a day-to-day basis, and we don't serve our needs by not knowing why we're doing that stuff. That's what you learn in art classes. You learn all that, not specifically what color to paint your house, but you're going to have a different color house if you take an art class.
When it comes time to paint your house, you're going to think about it a little more, maybe.
Well, the fact of the matter is, if you really, take a few basic art classes, just on a day-to-day basis, you'll feel a little more comfortable making visual decisions. It's a visual world. We need to know how to see it.
Great answer.
I hope so.
All right, so we don't have too much time left. I want to know what you think of where the future is going. Where's this going? Where's this digital media going?
Oh, gosh. I want to ask you the same question. It's like, do you have any ideas? Let me know, because it's that unsettled an area. Things are changing. We're just touching the surface as far as the whole technology thing is concerned. We're planning a new building, a new technology building at MJC right now, and we have to decide what to use our space for. And it's a tough call because we don't know what the technology is going to be. So our computer science guys are planning a multi-touch lab so we can touch the screen and play with them. I bet you that's passé about in 2 years when we start out. We might have little gloves on moving stuff around in the air like you see on some of the movies these days. So it's all going to change, and we just need to be flexible and nimble and make those changes as we go through. You can't know. Now, of course, I have some hints. When you talk to some of the people in the Bay Area at some of the big companies, which we do from time to time, or we have some friends at Pixar and various places like that, we get some little hints about some of the stuff that's coming around the bend. But even they aren't particularly sure where it's all going to go. So I can't even begin to answer that question in just this short amount of time.
Right.
If you gave me a couple hours to do it, then we could get into it. But
well, I think you gave some really good points.
Yeah.
Well, Brian, we're out of time, so thank you very much for being on the show. It's been a pleasure again. And thank you, viewers, for watching the show. Have a great day.